Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service through a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media. It is the last day of January, January 31st, 2023. And on this day, well, we certainly have some active weather going on in parts of the country. If you want additional information on top of what I provide, you can go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. And as mentioned yesterday, there's a frontal boundary where we have a nasty, icy mix of wintry weather from Texas on up through the lower middle Mississippi Valley, especially from central Texas near Dallas, Fort Worth, across Arkansas into western portions of Tennessee and northwest Mississippi. In fact, the metro areas of Dallas, Fort Worth, as well as Little Rock on over toward Memphis are under ice storm warnings, and they could see as much as a half-inch of freezing rain combined in mixed with some sleet at times. So this is going to be really slick, hazardous, treacherous driving conditions there. Travel is not recommended at all. But here in Alaska, our winter weather has kind of leveled out. We're not really too cold, too warm, but we're also watching some mainly light snow now diminishing across the interior, especially up through the middle Yukon Valley. That'll continue overnight tonight into early Tuesday. Still some brisk east to northeast winds up over 30 miles an hour along the Arctic coast, causing blowing snow, and those will continue tonight, at least through Wednesday morning and early afternoon. And then the Panhandle will be picking up some moderate rain and gusty winds, especially the southeast portion of the Panhandle, Wednesday through Thursday, especially late Wednesday night and Thursday. And then another interesting thing, polar stratospheric clouds are possible, especially around and north of the Arctic Circle. There have been some sightings in northern Europe. The upper stratosphere has gotten really cold, and conditions are favorable for those clouds to form. I'll talk more about those momentarily. Looking at Dead Horse, where there are those brisk east winds gusting at times over 30 miles an hour, the low southern sun now just above the southern horizon, temperature 7 below zero. Here's looking to the north there at Dead Horse, nice glow there with that low sun angle, but those east winds gusting to over 30 miles an hour, creating some areas of blowing snow. In Anchorage, this is Merrill Field, socked in with dense freezing fog, 25 degrees. A dense fog advisory has been extended through the overnight hours into early on Wednesday morning for the Anchorage Bowl, areas of western Turnagain Arm and on up toward Eagle River and Eklutna. And then in the far southern Panhandle, some rain showers and fog with a temperature of 36 there at Ketchikan. So here are the current advisories, winter weather advisories along sections of the Arctic coast through 3 p.m. Wednesday afternoon. We have the winter weather advisory for the area west of Fairbanks, including Manly Hot Springs toward Tanana, for as much as an additional 1 to 3 inches of snow through midnight tonight, especially along areas of the Elliott Highway could impact travel. And then down around the Anchorage Bowl being socked in with some dense fog. It's really impacting flights in and out of Merrill as well as Ted Stevens International Airport. So that's causing some travel delays and issues. And then talking about polar stratospheric clouds, or you may have heard them referred to as nacreous clouds or mother of pearl clouds. They form in the wintertime when the stratosphere reaches its coldest temperatures, and they form some 9 to 16 miles above the Earth's surface. They are the Earth's second highest clouds. The highest cloud is the noctilucent clouds that we can sometimes see in July or August here in the Northern Hemisphere during our summer. So this cloud forms when the temperature in the stratosphere gets below 80 degrees Celsius, below zero, a temperature around or colder than 112 Fahrenheit. And these clouds are composed of very tiny, supercooled water droplets or nitric acid, but they're very beautiful. They have this iridescence to them, kind of pastel-y, where you can see some pink, red, blue, green, yellows. Very beautiful. You will definitely know what you're looking at if you happen to see these, and they're very high up. They're above the normal clouds that we typically associate our weather with. 30th. Well, looking at the satellite imagery, we have moisture coming on up into British Columbia. Here's a low circulation in the lower Gulf North Pacific. We have another compact low in the central Bering with a trailing front through the central, pushing into the eastern Aleutians, and then a big high sitting up over the Arctic Ocean. That's what's bringing those brisk east winds along the Arctic coast, and not a whole lot of change coming up. The bit of moisture that's moved into the interior, especially just northwest of the Alaska range, that's the remnants of the initial frontal boundary that pushed through late weekend, early in the week. And here comes the next system, though. That's going to take, it's not going to quite move as fast as the last system. Weather map shows that low this afternoon, right down there just south of the central Gulf, and then another low here back out toward the west central portion of the Aleutians. As we go through tonight, the area of light snow in the interior around Tanana will begin to continue to diminish, and we'll see another wave of rain trying to rotate on up toward the Panhandle. That'll push into areas, especially of the southern Panhandle, be mainly rain on Wednesday, with another healthier push coming up on late Wednesday night, Thursday. Here comes that next frontal system with the low, compact low there out over the Bering. As that works its way, toward the southwest coast, a secondary low develops just southwest of Kodiak Island, south of the Alaska Peninsula. And then this low is going to bring some moderate to locally heavier rain across areas of the southern, southeastern Panhandle as we go through the day on Thursday, along with some gustier winds, perhaps up near gale force. But otherwise, no major storm systems for this time of year. Low temperatures will generally stay above freezing from Wrangell and Petersburg southward. Here, temperatures fairly steady around the Anchorage Bowl, Kenai Peninsula overnight. High temperatures around 40 or so there in the southern Panhandle Wednesday, and then up here near freezing around the Anchorage Bowl, but certainly slightly above that along coastal areas. And then for Thursday morning, we could see some readings single digits there up toward Glen Allen, and then daytime highs generally upper 20s to near 30 degrees western Kenai, Anchorage, Talkeetna, lower 40s here across areas of the southern Panhandle. Coldest temperatures could be in the 25-30 below range. Yukon Flats on up toward Arctic Village, still sub-zero though along the Arctic coast with those brisk winds. 15 or so at Nome. And then Wednesday afternoon, we'll get temperatures that stay below zero there through the Yukon Flats, northeast along the Arctic coast and North Slope, getting up into the mid-20s or so around Norton Sound. And then again, lows, some areas could approach 30 below a few of the normal cold spots there in the Yukon Flats and near Arctic Village. Otherwise, most areas will be a bit below zero. And then for Thursday afternoon, temperatures single digits above or below zero, fairly common. And then as we look at the southwest, readings generally dipping back into the teens tonight. There could be some patchy fog, a few lingering flurries above freezing out along the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, and the Aleutians could be back up near 40 or so at Dutch Harbor Wednesday afternoon. But in the 20s, Bethel on up toward Anvik and Imanok. And then as we go into Thursday morning, a little colder, lows single digits above and below zero, upper Kuskokwim Basin, but still generally above freezing as you trail out there through the Alaska Peninsula, with daytime highs upper 30s to near 40 in places here in the eastern Aleutians, and temperatures mainly staying in the teens for highs, at least for the southwest interior. Quick check of the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, and this would be February 6th through the 10th. Temperatures across much of the state, including the mainland out here through the Alaska Peninsula, near normal. Could be a little below normal along the North Slope and Arctic coast, and a little above normal, especially mid and southern sections of the Panhandle. Looking at precipitation, precipitation may average a little above normal across southern portions of the mainland into the Alaska Peninsula, as well as portions of, or much of the Panhandle, but we're still not looking at any major storms at this point. And as I mentioned, kind of a quieter stretch for midwinter, nothing too terribly exciting. Temperatures not really that warm or cool. So certainly you want to stay tuned to some later forecasts and keep your eyes peeled for those mother of pearl clouds.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look now at your aviation weather. If you have a flight plan this midweek, Wednesday or on Thursday, widespread IFR conditions are anticipated along the western arm of the Alaska Range, especially through the southwest interior, along southwest coast, Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula, out over the central Bering, a rather compact low and frontal system out there in through the central Bering. And then we also have IFR conditions rather extensive there and through the Panhandle early Wednesday. Stronger winds, easterly winds there along the Arctic coast, creating areas of blowing snow. And during Wednesday afternoon, IFR conditions should relax a bit to MVFR conditions in many areas, shrinking back here in the Panhandle. But we do see IFR across central Cook Inlet, the Kenai Peninsula, and then out over the Bering Sea, St. Matthew, to just east of St. Paul, associated with that frontal system working its way eastward. Thursday morning, IFR conditions develop along and south of the Alaska Range through the Copper River Basin, especially west side of Prince William Sound in through the eastern Kenai, and then along areas of the southwest, Bristol Bay on up through Nunavik Island and St. Matthew. Finally, Thursday afternoon, IFR conditions are anticipated in the southeastern quadrant there of the Panhandle, just north of the Alaska Range, south of the Yukon River, the Tanana River area, and then also out along Bristol Bay westward in through the central Aleutian, or I should say central Bering. Quick check of past conditions. Anatuvik Pass as well as Adigan Pass there up in the eastern Brooks Range should generally see VFR conditions on Wednesday. Further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill, generally IFR. Can't rule out a brief MVFR period, but overall IFR hugging that area of the Alaska Range. Rainy Pass IFR to start Wednesday, giving way to MVFR conditions. And right now in the central Alaska Range, Windy Pass looks to be mainly MVFR. Further east, Isabel, VFR conditions. And Metasta Pass there further east may see a brief period of MVFR conditions in the morning, giving way to VFR conditions. Tanita Pass starting out VFR, giving way to MVFR as the day unfolds. Further south and west, Portage Pass is kind of a split where we're going to see IFR conditions over the eastern Kenai, western Gulf, creep northward a bit. So MVFR going to IFR as we go through the day at Portage. And finally, the north end of the Panhandle at Chilkoot and White, IFR to start Wednesday morning, giving way to MVFR conditions. And looking at the freezing levels aloft for Wednesday morning, we expect freezing levels to be around and above 2,000 feet out over the Gulf, extending into the lower half of the Panhandle. You have to go all the way down south of Haida Gwaii toward Vancouver before they get back up around and above 4,000 feet. And the surface freezing line running along the Russian coast down to St. Matthew to Bristol Bay, on up across the Kenai Peninsula in through the northern Gulf, and then the inner channels of the Panhandle. Greatest threat for some moderate icing will be along areas of the outer Panhandle coast to between Haida Gwaii and British Columbia, above 6,000 feet there. The north end of the Gulf above 3,000 feet as we extend out to outside there near Prince William Sound and the east side of the Kenai. And then finally out further west in the central Bering around that compact low, some colder air aloft above 2,000 feet there, and perhaps above 4,000 feet as you get out along the frontal boundary in through the eastern Aleutians. Upper level jet stream winds not all that impressive at 30,000 feet, relatively light winds over the mainland behind me. Some winds south of the Aleutians out of the west-northwest, 75 knots. If we look at 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, again, winds out over the mainland, relatively light. A couple of compact lows though here. Here's the stronger one out over the central Bering with winds upwards of 60 knots north of the central Aleutians, and a week's low circulation there in the lower Gulf, North Pacific, but nothing too impressive with that. Bringing it down to 3,000 feet that week. Low sits out there with some winds around it upwards of 40 knots, but no real big impact across areas of the Panhandle. In the central interior, should note there could be some pockets of winds aloft at 3,000 feet, upwards of 35 to 40 knots south of the Brooks Range, up along the Yukon, middle Yukon Valley, and then here along the Arctic coast, east-southeast winds aloft as high as 35, 40 knots. And then finally behind me, the strongest winds are circulating upwards of 45 to 60 knots around that compact low in the central Bering, and that will translate over to the greatest threat of turbulence up along the Arctic coast, surface to 4,000 feet. And then as we look out along the tip of the Alaska Peninsula in through the Aleutians, we expect some moderate turbulence, surface to 4,000 feet.
I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite orbiting 22,000 miles above Earth. I can see a lot of cool stuff from up here, and I take pictures of it with my spiffy camera that has 16 different settings. I have such good eyesight, I can see clouds, snow, smoke, smog, and ash, so I can warn you about dangerous conditions and help you avoid them. When storms are brewing, I watch them closely and help with hurricane, tornado, and flood warnings to help keep you safe. And my lightning mapper tracks lightning strikes way up in the sky, even through dark, dense clouds. I also help with search and rescue missions. I listen for distress signals from emergency beacons and tell search and rescue teams just where to find people who need help. But even when I'm keeping a close eye on Earth, I'm monitoring weather out here in space, too. I watch the sun for big bursts of energy, which send waves of radiation toward Earth that can affect power grids, block communication with planes, cause errors in GPS, and damage satellites. Space weather is also very dangerous for astronauts working outside the International Space Station. I warn them so they can get inside where they'll be safe. So the next time you watch a weather report or check your phone for the forecast, remember, that's me. So look to the sky and wave. I'll be here. Things are looking pretty bad down there. But don't worry. I'm going to give weather forecasters a heads up and help you stay safe. I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite, and one of my jobs is to keep an eye on Earth's weather as I orbit above. But I'm 22,000 miles above Earth. How does your local weather forecaster know what I see all the way up here? First, I have to figure out what's going on. I point my special camera at the Earth and take pictures of the clouds I see below. My pictures show where the clouds are, but I also take lots of other notes about the clouds. For example, how high they reach into the atmosphere, how much rain they might cause, and when a severe storm may be forming. But I can't keep all of this information to myself. I have to share it with weather forecasters down on Earth. A big antenna is waiting for my call. Since I'm a satellite, I send my pictures and notes in a computer language of ones and zeros. Luckily, the antenna speaks my language. Computers connected to the antenna organize my notes and combine all of the pictures and cloud information and translate them into weather maps. They send a version of the maps back up to me. I'll hold on to these for later. Another copy of the maps is split into smaller pieces. This helps the maps move faster from one place to another. The map pieces are then sent for processing before being sent back up in the sky to a communication satellite. From there, the maps are picked up by antennas at the National Weather Service forecast offices in each region. There are more than 100 offices. I also take the maps that I received and send them out to companies that specialize in making the maps more colorful and better for viewing on TVs and computers. The colorful maps and the maps from the forecast offices then go to your local weather forecaster. The forecaster combines the information from these maps with lots of other information, like model forecast data and radar data, to make predictions about the upcoming weather in your area. And that's how I help you find out if bad weather is going to ruin your afternoon plans. You're welcome. Soon it will be my time to shine in outer space. I'm the GOES-R satellite. That stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite. And the R stands for my order in this series of weather satellites. Like my older siblings before me, I'll do a lot for watching weather, but I'm pretty special because I have a lot of new gadgets. I'm originally from Colorado, but my journey to space has a few stops along the way. I'll be shipped in a very special satellite shipping container to Kennedy Space Center. Moving me around is not easy. I'm over 18 feet wide and weigh 6,000 pounds. And then things get really exciting. I get loaded onto an Atlas V541 launch vehicle. A big rocket! Woo! After Atlas and I blast off together, my compartment separates from the launch vehicle and I continue to climb higher and higher. Then I break away completely and unfurl my solar panel and antenna. After that, I have to use my thrusters to get into just the right position, 22,000 miles above the ground and traveling 1.9 miles per second to keep up with Earth's rotation. And then I can officially start my job along with my fellow GOES sisters, where I take advanced pictures for more accurate weather forecasts, map lightning in real time, and improve the monitoring of the sun's activity. It's going to be so awesome! I can't wait!
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and it's now time to look at your marine weather, and starting with the sea ice. We have plenty of ice throughout the far north and in through the lower Chukchi Sea. There have been some plenteous areas of ice that have opened in through Kotzebue Sound, south of Kivalina, north and to the west of Shishmaref, and then also down along the east side of Norton Sound, as well as along the coast of far eastern Russia. More importantly, down here along the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas, we have areas that have opened up as well. Fair amount of melting going on the southern extent of this ice in through Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, and we do not at least anticipate in the shorter term any further southward progress of this ice. In fact, there's been a trend to retreat northward a bit, and that should continue here at least the next couple of days, though a little cooler temperatures will try to settle in, especially across areas farther north. As we look at the southeast panhandle, winds on Wednesday will be brisk there in Lynn Canal. North winds 30 knots, gusts 45. The south end, southeast winds to 20 knots, waves 5 feet or so around Metlakatla there, especially Dixon Entrance. And then along the outer coast, winds generally in the 20 to 25 knot range from the south-southeast, turning easterly once you get north of Sitka, and waves in the open waters of the Gulf running 7 to 10 feet. On Thursday, continue to see north winds along the length there of Lynn Canal, gusting as high as 45 knots. For the interior, northeast winds, Petersburg, but then southeast winds to 30 knots there. Waves as high as 11 feet down toward Dixon Entrance, and off of the coast there of the southern and western portions of the Panhandle, winds out of the southeast east around 25 knots, waves 9 to 12 feet. More easterly winds, not quite as strong, 15 knots with 7 to 8 foot waves from Yakutat westward. Across the northwestern Gulf, relatively light winds, variable winds around 10 knots off the Kenai, Prince William Sound through a good portion of Cook Inlet. The entrance of Cook Inlet could see northwest winds 25 knots, waves 6-7 feet. And then on Thursday, winds continue to be rather light, generally variable around 10 knots, and waves a couple of feet in Prince William Sound, as well as through the length of Cook Inlet. For the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island winds west-northwest 20-25 knots, 10-knot winds in through Bristol Bay, but winds turn back toward the south and southeast to 30 knots through the lower portion of the peninsula with waves 8 feet either side. And then on Thursday, we expect variable winds around 10 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, but they'll try and turn more toward the west 25 to 30 knots through the lower half of the peninsula with waves as high as 10 feet south of Sand Point and perhaps 12 feet there north of Cold Bay. Across the eastern Aleutians on Wednesday, strongest winds, well, the winds are going to start out south 30 to 35 knots, shifting west 30 to 35 knots with that front that pushes through a rather compact low pushing across the central Bering. And then for Thursday, the winds will come down 20-25 knots in the eastern Aleutians, more like 20 knots from the southwest once you get from Atka westward through Adak to Kiska, and waves generally around 10 feet on the North Pacific side, 8 to as high as 16 feet there outside of on Alaska and the Bering. And then across the areas of the coast, southwest, ice in place, easterly winds as high as 35 knots north of Nunavik Island to St. Matthew, waves 14 feet vicinity of St. Matthew and down towards St. Paul, where southeast gales to 40 knots could occur. And then on Thursday, winds out of Norton Sound northeast 20 knots, picking up to 30 knots south, I should say, between Nunavik Island and St. Lawrence, 25-knot winds in the vicinity of St. Matthew, and there's a bit of a low circulation right there between St. Matthew and Kuskokwim Bay. Winds could be out of the west at St. Paul with waves as high as 17 feet. And finally, along the Arctic coast, east winds 30 knots from Kaktovik down through Point Ley, falling off to easterly winds 20 to 25 knots through the lower Chukchi Sea and Bering Strait. And then on Thursday, winds will be east-northeast across much of the region, the Arctic coast, picking up a bit though. Point Ley down toward Point Hope, northeast winds 30 to 35 knots, falling off to 15 knots there in the lower Chukchi Sea, and then picking up to 30 knots off of the Seward Peninsula north of Nunavik Island. So that does it for our show tonight. Thank you for watching and have a great rest of the week.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.